You weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, more like a hot pair of iron tongs in your tiny, soot-streaked hands. Welcome to the world of the medieval blacksmith, where the forge isn't just a workplace. It's your cradle, your classroom, and your coffin in waiting. No lordly title, no family crest, just the distant cough of your father stoking. The flames before dawn and the scent of burning coal soaking into your baby blanket. From the very start, your life is fire. Before your teeth are in, your chores begin. You're barely old enough to stand, and already the family expects you to carry buckets of water and sweep coal dust off the floorboards. Your toys are chunks of scrap iron, your lullaby, the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil. While other children are taught to sing or sew, you learn to watch the color of molten steel without blinking. Safety, that's a future invention. You're raised with a constant background fear of slipping into the flames or touching the wrong end of the tongs. At 6 years old, the apprenticeship begins. That sounds noble, like you've been chosen by some ancient order. In truth, it just means you're now officially your father's free labor. Your payment is meager, a chunk of bread, a glare if you're lucky, and a kick in the backside if you're not. Your first lesson is to hold the bellows and not pass out. The second is to learn how to take an insult without crying. Your dad doesn't say much, but when he does, it's usually some version of harder, faster, or why is this bent? Other kids chase goats or climb trees. You learn to twist nails and quench red-hot metal. They play tag in the fields. You get burned for grabbing the wrong end of a horseshoe. Their feet are caked in mud. Yours are coated in a layer of ash and old iron filings, so thick your skin forgets what clean feels like. The forge doesn't stop for birthdays, festivals, or holidays. There are no snow days. The only time off you get is when you're unconscious. Your father doesn't believe in rest. If he sees you standing still, you're wasting his time. If you complain, he says, the fire doesn't care how you feel, and he's right. It doesn't. The forge is a beast that must be fed, with coal, with sweat, with childhoods, and you're just fuel, so you keep working. Because in this life, rest is for nobles, comfort is for priests, and dreams are something that die before the coals ever cool. By the time you're 7, the heat doesn't scare you anymore. Not because it's less painful, but because fear has simply been crowded out by repetition. You know the scorch marks on your arms, the pattern of blisters across your palms, and the way your fingertips swell from burns that never really heal. Your job title is apprentice, but that's a polite way of saying child who does everything and gets thanked for nothing. You rise before the rooster crows and collapse long after the last ember dims. Your breakfast is whatever crust is left from yesterday's meal, toasted unintentionally by the heat of the forge. You pump the bellows until your arms go numb. You stoke the fire until your eyebrows singe. You sweep, stack, clean, haul, and repeat endlessly. And if you do it all well, you get to do it again. If you mess up, you get yelled at, or worse, ignored. Your body adjusts in strange ways. Your hands stop blistering as much, but only because they've become thick and leathery like old boots. Your skin never truly washes clean. There's always a black layer of grime that clings like guilt. You develop the instinct to duck when tools fly, because your father doesn't believe in gentle correction. One time, you handed him the wrong size tongs. The horseshoe he chucked missed your head by a finger's width. He didn't apologize. He just muttered, "Use your eyes next time." Outside, life goes on. You hear laughter from the children in the village, the ones you used to play with before the forge claimed you. They're wrestling in hay piles, learning to herd animals, maybe pretending to be knights. You try not to resent them, but it's hard, especially when your own joy has been replaced by the constant ache of muscles pushed too far. They'll grow into farmers or cobblers. You'll grow into smoke, and it never ends. A nobleman's saddle buckle snapped. That's your problem. The farmer's plow cracked in half. Your hands are expected to fix it. Someone's gate won't shut. Your hammer is summoned, even if your legs are shaking from the last 10 hours on your feet. There's no such thing as "that's not my job" here. It's all your job. Every broken thing, every warped tool, every angry customer is a nail in your coffin, and you're the one who made it. At night, when you lie on your straw mat, your arms twitch with leftover hammer swings, your ears ring, your back pulses, but you still think about tomorrow, the same blisters, the same burns, the same breathless work. And strangely, you hope it comes fast, because if you're not working, you're not surviving. The forge has you now. You're not living in it. You're dissolving into it, bit by bit, swing by swing. You used to think childhood was something you'd have like a cloak you'd wear for a while before putting on the heavier robes of adulthood. But in the blacksmith's world, childhood is a rumor, a story someone else told about someone else's life. For you, it ended the moment you were strong enough to lift a bucket of water without falling into it. From that day forward, you belonged to the forge. There were no wooden swords or carved toys, just hot metal and rusted nails. Your jungle gym was a rack of fire-warmed tongs. Your sandbox was filled with coal dust. The smell of burning leather replaced any scent of wildflowers or wet earth. Even the wordplay began to feel unfamiliar, like a foreign language everyone else understood. But you had long since forgotten, and everything hurt. Your hands were always raw. Your shoulders ached before noon. You learned how to stand for hours without moving, to ignore the sting of sweat dripping into cuts, and to hold your breath when the smoke grew too thick to see. There were no breaks, no holidays, only pauses between tasks, brief moments where your body threatened to collapse before the next thing needed fixing. Being an apprentice didn't mean you got to learn the secrets of metalwork like a noble student in a master's class. It meant doing everything no one else wanted to do, cleaning soot from the walls, fetching water that sloshed down your tunic, picking up shards of iron that bit into your fingertips. You worked in silence. You learned by watching. You spoke only when spoken to, and even then you flinched before every word. Your father, the master of the forge, never praised you. The most affection he showed was a grunt that meant acceptable. If he didn't yell, that was your reward. He never once said "good job." He never had to, because in his eyes, you weren't a child. You were a blacksmith in training, and that training came wrapped in heat, in pain, in pressure, just like the iron you hammered day after day. The village kids, they started calling you the smoke boy. You didn't mind. It was better than being invisible. They saw you through the haze rising from the forge, your arms swinging a hammer too big for your size, your eyes red from heat and strain. They pitied you until they needed something fixed. Then they called you useful. By now, you could make nails, hundreds of them. You'd hammer them straight, mess one up, reheat it, and start again. You weren't just learning how to shape iron. You were learning patience, pain tolerance, and how to keep your mouth shut while someone criticized every swing you took. And you did it all without complaint. because to complain meant weakness. And weakness didn't survive in this place. This wasn't childhood, it was an anvil, and you were being shaped, whether you liked it or not. By the time you're 10, the forge isn't just a place where you work, it's where you live. It's in your lungs, under your nails, stitched into every fold of your tunic. The heat, once unbearable, has become the background noise of your life, like birdsong, except instead of music, it's fire. Your ears ring, even when the hammer's silent. Your arms ache, even when you're still. You no longer ask if the work will get easier. You just ask yourself if you can keep going. There's a rhythm to it all now, a brutal, punishing rhythm. The bellows groan, the coals crackle, the hammer sings its metal song. You know exactly when to strike, how to flip the iron, where to cool it. Your body responds on instinct, not because it's easy, but because it's been burned into your bones. You've stopped noticing when you're hungry, stopped noticing when you're tired. Pain has become a permanent roommate. You don't invite it, but you no longer try to make it leave. Your father doesn't slow down. If anything, he pushes you harder. You're not a boy, he grunts. You're a smith. That's his way of saying you're old enough to be useful. If you hesitate, he scowls. If you stumble, he mutters something about weakness. You don't remember the last time he smiled, or if he ever did. The forge hasn't made him gentle, it's made him stone. Your friends, or what's left of them, are starting to notice. They say things like, "You look older," or "You don't come to the market anymore." Of course you don't. The forge doesn't care if you want to see the world. It only cares if you can lift the hammer. When the bell tower chimes for evening prayer, they kneel in chapels. You kneel in ash to scrape the soot off your boots. The clothes you wear haven't changed in years. The same tunic, singed at the sleeves. The same leather apron, cracked from heat. The color doesn't matter anymore. Everything turns gray eventually. Soot paints your world in monochrome. Even your dreams are colorless, just smoke, sparks, and the sound of metal ringing in your ears. And yet, something strange happens. There are moments, brief, flickering moments, when it feels like you're doing more than surviving. When the iron bends just right, when the blade shines without flaw, when the horseshoe you forged slides perfectly onto the hoof. In those moments, you're not just the blacksmith's son, you're the fire's equal, a creator, not a servant, a boy who can shape the world even if it burns him in the process. But then the moment ends. The next order is waiting. The coals are cooling, and your father's voice calls from across the forge, time to get back to work. Because fire doesn't care about your pride, only your production. Your friends, the ones who still wave at you from across the square, are just beginning to stretch into adolescence. Their limbs grow longer, their faces change shape. They talk about how their voices are cracking, how their boots feel tighter, how their bones ache from growing. You listen and nod, but your aches come from a different place. Your arms are already thick from years of swinging a hammer, but not in a proud or statuesque way. They've become tools, functional, overworked, and stiff. Your back is starting to curve. Not because you're old, but because you've been hunched over the anvil since you were 6. You catch your reflection in the surface of the water bucket sometimes. Not because you're vain, but because you're trying to remember what your face looks like without a soot mask. Your shoulders crack every time you roll them. Your knees pop when you crouch, and your hands, let's talk about your hands. You used to have fingers. Now you have iron stumps pretending to be fingers. They're always dry, cracked, and sore. No matter how often you wrap them in cloth, the cuts find their way in. Blisters layer over old blisters. Burn scars blend with bruises. Some of your fingernails are gone entirely. Others hang on like chipped glass, blackened from years of close encounters with heated metal. When someone hands you bread, you grip it like it might fall apart, not because you're delicate, but because your joints no longer trust your muscles to do the job right. There is no rest day, no day off. There's just work that hasn't been finished yet. You strain a muscle, keep going. Twist a wrist, use the other one. You're not paid for feeling, you're paid for forging. And that pay, more often than not, comes in the form of a half-rotten onion or a coin so thin it might have been sliced from a pewter plate. One customer offered you a goose once. The goose bit you and ran off. That was the whole payment. And when you finally stagger toward bed, if you can even call it that, you expect to collapse instantly. But instead, you lie there awake, your ears still ringing from the clang of steel. Your arms twitch involuntarily, like they're swinging phantom hammers in your dreams. Your skin itches from heat, rash, and dust. Your bones throb. Even your aches have aches. When your father hears you complain, he doesn't scold you. He nods. Good, he says, means you're learning. And in a twisted way, you are. You're learning what pain feels like, and what it means to keep going anyway. You're becoming iron, not because you want to, but because you have to. In most trades, smoke is a problem, a byproduct, an inconvenience, something to be wafted away. In yours, it's a constant companion, a clingy, choking shadow that seeps into your lungs and never leaves. The forge is your home, your prison, your inheritance, and your smoke-filled classroom. You've stopped coughing, not because it got better, but because your body gave up the fight. You don't clear your throat anymore. You just live with the burn. The air inside the forge is thick, not just with heat, but with particles you can't name. Black flecks from coal, gray dust from grinding wheels, the metallic tang of iron filings that settle on your tongue like snow from some terrible storm. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets in as much smoke as it lets out. On windy days, it swirls around like a trapped spirit. On calm ones, it simply sits there, waiting to poison you slowly. You tried tying a cloth over your face once. It helped, until it got soaked with sweat and started smelling worse than the air it was meant to filter. Breathing through it felt like sucking air through a rotten sock. You took it off. Decided that smoke in your lungs was less disgusting than your own breath boiling back into your mouth. Your father, he's worse. His cough shakes the rafters. He hacks like someone's trying to pull a horseshoe out of his chest with a rope. But he still works, still grumbles, still bellows, orders like the forge's voice made flesh. If the smoke has taken anything from him, it's not his pride, just his ability to sleep without wheezing. You've learned to navigate the haze by instinct. You know where the stones are hottest. You know which parts of the floor collect soot in thick, ankle-deep drifts. You can find a tool on the bench without seeing it. Your eyes sting constantly, and you've long given up rubbing them. It just smears the grit deeper. The white of your eyes, permanently pink. The insides of your nose, black, even after you blow it. You stopped being surprised by the color of your spit a long time ago. And yet, you still show up, still sweat, still breathe through this toxic stew, because there is no alternative. You can't fix swords with prayers. You can't mend plows with poetry. And you can't quit, not unless you plan to starve or shame your family. The fire has to stay lit. The orders have to be filled. You are a blacksmith, and that means breathing smoke like it's air and hammering steel like your life depends on it, because it does. And when the forge goes quiet, when the last ember fades and the last order is done, the silence doesn't bring peace. It brings dread. Because in that stillness, you can hear your body falling apart. You don't own much. A single spare tunic, maybe. A crusty blanket that smells like firewood and regret. But your tools, they're yours. Not because you bought them, you didn't. Most were passed down, handed over, or patched together from broken pieces. But over time, they've become more than objects. They're like broken teeth in your jaw, flawed, painful, but impossible to live without. Your hammer is first. It's not new. It was old before you were born. The wooden handle is warped and splintered, and the head is so worn it's more oval than round. But it fits your hand in a way that no other object ever has. You know the weight. You know the rhythm. When it lands on hot iron, it sings. When it lands wrong, it punishes. You've named it, though you never say the name out loud. You've cursed at it more times than you've prayed. But without it, you're not a blacksmith. You're just a tired boy standing in smoke. Then there are the tongs. Clunky, heavy, always too hot or too cold. They're your second set of fingers, except less precise and more cruel. They pinch you. They slip at the worst moments. They catch the skin on your palm like jealous lovers when you try to let go. But you still reach for them every time, because they're better than grabbing red-hot iron with your bare hands, something you've done more than once anyway. The chisel, it used to be sharp. Now it's a suggestion. You've used it to carve, to split, to pry, to wedge, even to clean soot from your boots. You promise yourself you'll sharpen it. Maybe tomorrow, but tomorrow brings new fires, new jobs, new excuses. So it waits, dull and judgmental, at the corner of your bench, like an old mentor who stopped offering advice because you never listen. Your workbench is chaos, a battlefield of files, awls, punches, rivet sets, and cracked wood stained by sweat and blood. You've been jabbed, sliced, and smashed by every single tool you own. You have scars that match their shapes, muscle memory that flinches before pain arrives. And yet you line them up every night, not out of sentiment, but survival. If one of them breaks, you can't work. If you can't work, you can't eat. And your apron, meant to protect you, it mostly collects sparks and redirects them into your thighs. The leather is stiff and misshapen, burned in places where hot slag landed and stayed. It smells like scorched meat and wet coal. Still, you strap it on each day like armor, not because it works, but because it's the only thing standing between your flesh and the forge. Your tools don't love you, but they understand you. They've shaped you as much as you've shaped iron. They build your reputation. They break your body. And like everything else in this life, they demand more than they give. You don't wear a crown. You don't carry a sword. You don't ride a horse through the village with armor that catches sunlight. But none of that matters, because if you vanished tomorrow, the entire town would grind to a halt. The knight might be the one who charges into battle, but his sword is your work. The farmer tills the land with your plow. The monk rings the bell that you fixed last spring after a lightning strike cracked it down the center. The baker's oven, you made the hinges. The inn's front gate, your latch. The shepherd's dog collar buckle, yours, too. You are the invisible scaffolding of the village, the hands that make things function. And yet, no one sees you. People show up without warning, always mid-task, always mid-swing, and always with a variation of the same phrase. I know you're busy, but can you fix this? But could you just take a quick look? But surely, it won't take long. You're expected to be a wizard with molten metal, a miracle worker with rusted tools, and a servant with no sense of time. And no one says thank you. When their sword slices clean, they credit their training. When their gate swings shut without a squeak, they nod at the woodwork. When their oven bakes evenly, they praise the recipe. You are the blackened, blistered, bent-backed reason all of it works, but your name is never mentioned, and the pay, inconsistent at best, laughable at worst. A silver coin here, half a loaf of stale barley bread there. Once, a man offered you a dead chicken. You didn't know whether to be insulted or grateful until you realized it was missing a leg. The soup still turned sour. You don't argue. You can't. Everyone needs you, but no one wants to pay you like they do. They think a hinge is just a hinge. A shovel is just a shovel. But you know better. You know what it takes to shape iron until it sings. You know the cost of getting it wrong, the burns, the misfires, the hours lost to reshaping something bent just slightly off. You're the town's final resort. When their horse throws a shoe, when their cart breaks on market morning, when their latch falls off in the rain, you're the one they run to, not the carpenter, not the priest, not the Lord, you. And still, no songs are sung about you. No children pretend to be blacksmiths when they play. No one raises a cup at the tavern and toasts to the man who keeps the wheels turning and the walls from falling apart. You're not the hero of anyone's story. But here's what they don't realize. The knight might win battles. The priest might save souls. But none of them would last a week without your work. You are the reason the world still turns, even if it never turns toward you. You'd think peace would be a blessing. No more clashing swords, no more armor to mend, no more bloodstains on breastplates. But for you, peace is a slow death, not from violence, but from silence. When war is near, the forge roars. The heat has purpose. The clang of metal is steady, rhythmic, constant. Orders flow in like river water. Swords, helmets, spearheads, arrow tips by the dozen. You barely sleep, but the coins roll in, and your stomach stays full. Then the fighting stops. The local lord strikes a truce. The knights stop marching. The danger recedes, and with it goes your livelihood. The fire in the forge still burns, but only out of habit. The hammer swings, but mostly on hinges and horseshoes. You go from crafting weapons to patching wagon wheels and reshaping bent nails pulled from crumbling chicken coops. And the people, they want miracles on a beggar's budget. A farmer brings in a rusted scythe blade, cracked clean through the middle. Can you fix this? He asks, holding it like it's a family heirloom. You nod, of course, because what else can you do? He pays you with 3 onions and a promise to send eggs next week. He doesn't. Your forge becomes a marketplace of desperation. Everyone needs something. No one wants to pay for it. They treat your work like magic, instant, effortless, expected. They don't understand the hours it takes to heat, reforge, temper, and test. They just want it done by sundown, and cheaper, if possible. You become not just a blacksmith, but a negotiator, a merchant, a desperate peddler, arguing over the price of labor with people who think you live off the heat alone. You start to miss the chaos of war, not the bodies, not the fire, not the dread, but the clarity. When blades broke and shields dented, there was purpose. Your hands had value. You didn't have to beg for it. Now you're making ladles and pothooks, mending iron door handles so rusted they crumble when touched, patching farm tools that should have been replaced a generation ago. Each task feels smaller. Each job feels more like survival and less like craft. And when you suggest raising your rates just slightly, just to keep coal in the bin, people look at you like you insulted their ancestors. It's just hammering metal, they say, as if iron folds itself and hardens into form with a pleasant hum and no effort, as if the burns on your arms and the cracks in your knuckles are just decorations. You start to whisper something you never thought you would. Maybe a skirmish wouldn't be so bad, just a small one, a border dispute, a bandit raid, something, anything, to break the stillness and bring purpose back to the fire. Because, as cruel as war is, it feeds the forge. And when swords break, you eat. There are jobs that finish: dig a ditch, fill a cart, harvest a row of barley. Done. There's an end, a pause, maybe even a moment to breathe before the next thing begins. But blacksmithing doesn't work like that. Your work doesn't end. It waits. It piles up like coals behind the forge wall, always ready to ignite. You fix one thing, and two more break. Mend a wheel in the morning, and by noon, someone snapped a rake handle clean off. Shaped 20 nails, and the customer returns asking for 20 more. Longer, this time, and also with a bend in the end for some reason. The grind is endless, the pace cruel, not just physically, but mentally. There's never a sense of completion, only delay, only the moment between problems. Your day starts before the sun dares rise. You roll out of bed, your back protests. Your hands are already stiff, like they froze into claws overnight. You stretch, but the ache doesn't go away. It simply makes room for more ache to settle in. The forge needs tending. The tools are cold. The coals need waking up. So you do what you always do. You get to work. Sometimes you dream of having a moment to yourself. Just one uninterrupted hour with a cup of warm ale. A walk in the woods. A seat by the market fountain. But even when you're granted time, by miracle or mercy, your brain refuses to rest. It replays the jobs you didn't finish. The hinge that didn't sit quite right. The dagger that didn't sharpen the way it should. And the worst part, you never forget who still owes you half a dozen eggs, 3 copper coins, a single thank you. None of them have arrived. Even the quick jobs are a lie. Someone walks in holding a mangled iron hook. Just needs a little fixing, they say. You nod. You know it's 2 hours. You know it'll need to be reshaped from scratch, quenched, retempered, ground smooth. But they'll hover, they'll ask, almost done, before you've even started. And when you think, finally, the day is winding down, your apprentice bursts through the door. The friar's ill, he says. We have to shoe the priest's mule before sunset. Of course you do, because you're the blacksmith. Around here, blacksmith means last resort. It means the job no one else can do, and no one else thinks about until it's urgent. You don't keep a to-do list. Lists suggest an end. Blacksmithing doesn't end. It loops. You work, you fix, you repeat, until your hammer breaks or your spine does, whichever comes first. And strangely, in a way that no sane person would understand, you don't just accept it, you love it. You'd think that after a day spent hammering hot iron, carrying buckets, pumping bellows, and breathing in a forge's worth of smoke, you'd be rewarded with two simple things: a full belly and a good night's rest. But you are not a knight, you are not a noble, you are a blacksmith, and in this world, food and sleep are not guaranteed. They are not even luxuries, they are interruptions. Let's talk food first, or the mockery of it. You burn through energy like a runaway horse, but what you get in return barely qualifies as a meal. A slice of coarse bread may be still warm from the baker if you're lucky, but more likely yesterday's, hard enough to chip a tooth. A bowl of pottage that's been reheated so many times it tastes more of smoke than turnip. If the stars align, there might be a bit of salted pork, not a slice, a scrap, just enough to remind you that real food exists somewhere, just not in your life. And you don't eat sitting down at a table with clean hands and clean thoughts. You eat standing up, hunched over the forge, one hand still holding tongs while the other fends off ash. The bowl rests on a crate or an anvil, and if a customer walks in mid-bite, the stew goes cold, and the bread becomes a chewable rock. Meals are not for nourishment, they're for fuel. Shovel it in, get back to work. Then comes sleep, or something that pretends to be it. You don't have a feather bed. You have a sack of straw that's too soft in the wrong places and too stiff in others. The blanket, scorched wool that smells of old sweat, forge smoke, and something you can't identify but suspect is mold. Your body doesn't relax into it, it collapses. And even then, your mind doesn't follow. Your ears still ring with the memory of hammer blows. Your arms twitch with phantom movements as if you're still swinging even in dreams. You lie awake, staring into the dark, thinking about that one rivet that didn't quite sit right, or that cracked hinge someone swore was fixed, but your gut says otherwise. Rest doesn't come, it negotiates. You might snatch half an hour here, a moment there, until the next problem wakes you, or someone at the door does. Because the forge never sleeps, it cools, but it waits. And the village waits with it. Someone's always in need. A noble's hunting party might ride out at dawn and demand sharpened swords. A merchant's cart might fall apart mid-journey. A latch might snap in the middle of a stormy night. When that happens, guess who they wake? You. You eat when you can, sleep when you're allowed, and pray the fire doesn't go out while you're dreaming. Because if it does, you'll wake to more than a cold hearth. You'll wake to failure. There was a time when your hands were soft. You don't remember it clearly, just a vague memory of smoother skin, the ability to stretch your fingers without hearing something pop. Maybe it was when you were 5, maybe younger. Those hands are gone now. What you have left are tools shaped like fingers, cracked, swollen, and unforgiving. Your palms are a topography of blisters, layered like sediment. Old burns sit beneath fresh ones, and the scars crisscross so tightly that your skin resembles hardened bark. The joints of your knuckles bulge from overuse, like stone knots in a tree. Each one clicks when you move, and every click comes with a whisper of pain. It's not sharp, not urgent, just persistent, like a ghost that refuses to stop tugging at your nerves. Your grip is strong enough to crush walnuts without effort. You once snapped a ladle's handle just by picking it up too hard. But the strength comes at a price. Fine movement is gone. You drop things. You fumble with coins. You can't thread a needle. Can't undo the ties on your own boots without muttering curses under your breath. Your fingers shake when it's cold. Your wrists throb when it's damp. And sometimes, often, you don't even notice when you've been cut. It's the blood that reminds you. A splash on the workbench. A warm trickle down your wrist. Again, you mutter. Wrap it in cloth. Keep hammering. Your fingernails are another story. Half of them are blackened, the rest chipped beyond recognition. You've lost a few over the years. 2 hammer slips, 2 pinched tongs, 2 doors slammed in haste. Some came off clean, others didn't. Once, your thumb was crushed so badly, it turned purple-black and stayed that way for weeks. Did you stop working? No, you just switched hands and worked through the pain. You've branded yourself more times than a cattle farmer. The burns come in different flavors. Some are quick, a hiss, a flash, a flinch. Others linger, the ones where you didn't pull away fast enough, where the metal stuck, sizzled, and left behind a bubbling scar that took weeks to stop weeping. Those are the ones that changed your nerves, where the flesh came back different, thicker, deader, and less human. But still, you swing the hammer. Still, you hold the tongs. Because these ruined hands are the reason you survive. They shape iron, they earn food, they carry the weight of every gate, hinge, every sword, every horseshoe that keeps the village turning. They hurt constantly, but they work, and that's all that matters. There's no retirement for hands like these. No rest, no healing, just slower work and deeper pain. But as long as you can grip the hammer, you keep going. Because in this life, it's not about how broken you are. It's about whether you can still forge through the fire. You don't smell like a person anymore. That ended years ago. Whatever scent clung to you as a child, bread, pine sap, the muddy earth after rain, it's been burned out of you. Now you carry a different aroma. A permanent fog of smoke, sweat, scorched leather, and old iron. It follows you wherever you go, like a second shadow, clinging to your skin, your hair, even your breath. You can scrub if you want. If the river's not frozen. If you're not too exhausted. If you can spare a quarter hour between tasks. But even when you do, the smell doesn't vanish. It just retreats, waits in your pores, and returns the moment the forge roars back to life. Soap is a suggestion. Water, a brief flirtation with cleanliness, true cleanliness. That's for people who don't live wrapped in flame. Your sweat is its own brand of pungent, not the musky, human kind. Something more bitter, like meat left too close to the fire. Your tunic is stiff from it. The leather apron, once flexible, now folds like dry bark. You tell yourself that it's protection, that the stiffness keeps the hot flakes of iron from reaching your skin. But the truth is, it traps everything in, the stink, the heat, the weight of the job. Perfume, you tried it once. A gift from someone, a traveling cousin, maybe. Or a merchant you patched a gate for, a little vial of something floral. You wore it to the tavern, hoping to cut through the usual nose wrinkling as you passed. It lasted 10 minutes, then the forge swallowed it whole. The smoke laughed, the sweat fought back harder, and just like that, you were back to smelling like roasted steel wrapped in ash. Animals sense it. Dogs growl, cats hiss. Chickens scatter when you walk past. They don't recognize you as a man, just a moving pillar of furnace smoke. Children wrinkle their noses. Women lean away. Even the innkeeper, who's known you since you were small, keeps a rag handy to wipe down the bench after you leave. You've come to expect it, embrace it even. The corner seat at the tavern is yours, not because it's preferred, but because no one else wants to sit near the forge. The windows cracked open just for you. The others pretend it's for the draft, but you know better. And yet, despite all this, you're not invisible. You're known, maybe not admired, but remembered. the blacksmith, they say, with a mix of respect and nasal discomfort. You might not charm a crowd, but your scent enters the room before you do, and lingers long after. Because this smell, it's proof you've worked, proof you've burned, proof you've endured. It's not pleasant, it's not pretty, but it's honest. And in this world, that's worth more than perfume. You didn't choose this life. The forge chose you. Or rather, it was passed to you like a curse wrapped in duty, handed down from your father's cracked palms and into your own. And now, it's your turn to pass it forward. You have a son. And he's already beginning to smell like you. Burnt metal, coal dust, wet burlap. He's not even tall enough to see over the anvil, but he can find the tongs by memory and knows better than to flinch at flying sparks. You should feel guilty, and sometimes, late at night, when the coals have died and the wind whistles through the cracks in the shutters, you do. You remember what it was like to be small, afraid, overwhelmed. You remember the heat that felt too big, the fire that seemed alive and angry. You remember the weight of a hammer that didn't fit your hand, and the way your father's silence said more than words ever could. But the guilt doesn't last, because you know the truth. You're not being cruel, you're preparing him. The world doesn't wait for soft hands. It doesn't reward innocence. It demands skill, strength, resilience. The forge teaches all three. It burns away what's weak and shapes what remains. And one day, when your arms stop responding and your knees refuse to rise, your son will need to carry the hammer you can no longer lift. So you teach him, not gently, but not unkindly either. You bark, yes, hold it right, not like that, don't cry. It's only a burn. You tell him how to judge heat by the color of the metal, how to feel the temper of the blade without words, how to listen to the hiss, the crackle, the groan, the language of fire. You shout when he drops something, scowl when he hesitates, grunt when he does something right, and he understands, because he's watching the same way you once watched your father. There are soft moments, too. You don't speak of them aloud, but they exist. A story by the hearth when the night is long. A piece of dried fruit slipped into his palm when a customer overpays. A nod of approval when he manages the bellows without help. You see his eyes glow, not with pride, but with a dangerous thing, hope. He wants to be like you. That scares you more than any burn ever did. You know what this life does. You know the toll it takes, the hunched back, the scorched skin, the lungs that feel like they're stuffed with ash. But the fire must be kept alive. The forge must burn. Not for your sake, but for the village, for everyone who depends on steel shaped in silence. So you teach the boy, not just the work, but the life. Because someone must hold the hammer when your hands fall still. And now that someone is watching. The thing no one tells you is that iron has a temper, not just in the metallurgical sense, though that's true too, but in the way a wild animal has one. Sometimes, even when you've done everything right, it still resists. It bends when it shouldn't. It cracks when it should hold. It breaks apart with a noise so sharp it echoes in your skull for hours. You learn to expect it. You learn not to take it personally, but some days it feels like the forge itself is in a mood. Today is one of those days. You've been trying to shape a new plowshare for the last 2 hours. The iron bar is thick, resistant to stubborn by half. You've reheated it 3 times. The last time, it came out red and angry, the color of an overripe cherry about to burst. You strike it, steady, controlled, textbook form, and still, it twists like it's mocking you. You press it against the anvil edge to correct the curve, and it snaps. Not clean, not even, just enough to ruin the piece entirely. You stare at it, breathe, say nothing. Your apprentice looks up, wide-eyed. "Shall I?" "No," you growl. "Start again." You toss the broken piece to the side, another offering to the ever-growing pile of failed work. The corner where those rejects go is starting to resemble a graveyard. Blades too thin, hooks that cracked, hinges that warped, all waiting to be melted down and reborn someday, if you ever get the time. Your hands are sore, your shoulders burn, your shirt clings to your back like wet canvas. But the fire is still hot, and the work must go on. So you take another bar, feed it into the flames, and wait. Watch. Iron teaches patience, or punishes the lack of it. You listen for the sound of the fire, the low, hungry hiss that says it's ready. You watch the color shift, dark red to orange, to a golden white that pulses like a living thing. You feel the heat on your face, on your eyelids, on the backs of your hands. This is the moment when everything matters. 1 second too long, and the iron goes brittle. 1 second too soon, and it won't bend. You pull it out, position it, raise the hammer. The strike feels right, again and again. This time, the iron yields. You don't smile. There's no time for that. But there's a quiet satisfaction, the kind that only comes after failure and fury. Not triumph, just relief. Because today, you fought the iron, and for once, it listened. You know it won't always, but that's what makes this work sacred. Not the success, but the struggle. The bellows don't look like much at first, just a sagging sack of leather, clamped between wooden boards, sitting beside the forge like an old, tired animal. But anyone who's ever worked the fire knows the bellows are the lungs of the forge. Without them, the coals don't rage. Without them, the iron doesn't glow. Without them, there is no heat. And without heat, you are nothing. You've been working them since you were barely old enough to reach the handles. Back then, you thought it was just a chore, something to keep your hands busy while your father did the real work. But now you understand. The rhythm of the bellows is everything. Too soft, and the flame sputters. Too strong, and it chokes. It's a dance, a balance. You push and pull, until your arms burn and your back seizes up, and still you keep going. The leather is cracked from years of heat and ash. You've patched it so many times, the seams look like a stitched wound. The handles are polished smooth from generations of blacksmiths. Your father, your grandfather, and now you. Someday, your son's palms will wear the same grooves into the wood. It's a strange legacy, but it's yours. People don't think about the bellows when they look at your work. They admire the blade, the horseshoe, the rivet. They don't ask how the forge stayed hot enough to shape it, but you know. You remember every hour spent standing beside the fire, muscles locked in repetition, sweat dripping into your boots, smoke curling around your legs. You didn't just shape the iron, you fed the flame that made it possible. The noise of the bellows is its own kind of language, a slow creak when it's full, a whispering rush as air floods the fire, a low sigh as it exhales. You know the sounds by heart. You can tell, without looking, if something's wrong, a leak in the leather, a blockage in the pipe, a falter in the rhythm. When the forge stutters, your hands respond before your brain does. And it's not just about heat, it's about timing. The bellows must match the moment, the metals glow, the hammers rise, the breath between strikes. You become a part of the forge, not a man beside the fire, but an extension of it. There's no glory in it. No one celebrates the one who pumped the flame. But without you, the blade would be dull, the hinge would stay warped, the fire would die. So you keep at it, day after day, pulling, pushing, sweating, burning. You are the lungs of this place. You are the breath that keeps the fire alive. And you know, better than anyone, that once the bellows stop, so does everything else. You don't meet nobles often. Most of them don't walk through your part of town. Their boots aren't meant for cobblestones soaked with soot. But when they do come, it's not for you, it's for their sword. And in those moments, you stop everything. Not because they deserve it, but because the punishment for delay could cost you more than a day's wages. They arrive on horseback, their tunics lined with fur, their gloves embroidered with thread that costs more than your tools. They don't dismount, they simply gesture. A servant steps forward and presents the weapon, wrapped in silk. The blade has a chip in it, maybe a dent near the fuller. Nothing that can't be fixed. But the noble speaks like it's urgent, like the world depends on the edge of this sword being flawless again. You nod, you bow, you say yes, my lord, even though your back aches and your forge is already overloaded. They don't ask if you're busy. They assume you're waiting for their arrival, waiting to be useful, waiting for the opportunity to touch something finer than a pitchfork or a plowshare. When they leave, the sword remains. And that's when the real work begins. This isn't ordinary iron. It's steel, folded, quenched, carefully forged. It sings differently beneath the hammer. Not louder, not sweeter, just more precise. You feel every vibration from pummel to tip. You work slower, more carefully. A mistake here could mean more than embarrassment. It could mean punishment. Nobles aren't forgiving when their steel is damaged. You sharpen the edge, grind out the imperfections, repolish the fuller until it gleams like moonlight on water. You rewrap the hilt with new leather if you have any to spare. If not, you use old scraps and make it look new. You take pride in the finish, not because the noble will notice, but because this sword will be held up as a symbol of perfection. And you'll get no credit, no payment beyond what was agreed. And even that might be less than promised. Once, a baron handed you a copper coin and said, "For your trouble." It didn't cover the cost of coal you used to fix the blade, but you bowed, thanked him, watched him ride away. Your apprentice watches you work, wide-eyed. "That sword is beautiful," he whispers. You nod, without looking up. "So's a scythe," you reply. If it's sharp, he doesn't understand yet, but he will. Beauty means nothing if it doesn't work. Nobles care about appearances. Blacksmiths care about function. When the noble returns, they inspect the blade with mild interest, like admiring a fine table. They nod, maybe grunt. They don't ask your name. But when they ride off into battle, the sword they carry will be your work, your sweat, your burns. And you'll go back to shaping horseshoes for a man who still owes you 3 onions. Your forge isn't a grand stone building with high arches and carved lintels. It's a shack, a tired wooden skeleton slumped between 2 larger buildings, leaning slightly as if apologizing for its existence. The walls are scorched from years of heat and soot. The beams groan when the wind shifts. The roof, patched with every spare scrap you've ever found, leaks, always leaks. When it rains, you learn where the drips are. You've mapped them, not on parchment, but in habit. You know which stool must be moved, Which part of the bench must be covered? You keep buckets on hand, not for water, but for catching water. On heavy storm nights, the forge becomes a symphony of dripping, creaking, and the distant groan of damp wood protesting its burden. And yet you work. Even with wet coals and soaked boots, you still swing the hammer. The fire sputters at first, coughing up black smoke that stings your eyes and chokes your breath. But you coax it back to life, carefully, patiently, because people don't stop needing iron just because the sky is crying. Rust becomes the second enemy. The first is time, but rust waits, creeps. It shows up when you're not looking, on the edge of a chisel, beneath the shelf, inside the hinge of the door. You thought you mended just fine. You fight it with oil, with rags, with heat, and still it comes back. Some mornings you wake to find the entire tool bench kissed with orange. It flakes like dry skin, spreads like moss. You wipe it away, resharpen everything, and keep moving, because the alternative is surrender. And in your trade, surrender means watching everything you built slowly dissolve into rot. The worst part is when it touches a finished piece, a horseshoe, shaped and cooled, waiting by the door, now mottled with rust because the roof leaked during the night, or a blade, nearly done, its spine now streaked with pitting. You curse, loud. Your apprentice flinches. You start over. You've learned to work faster in damp weather, learned to dry tools near the fire, learned to listen for the soft hiss of water dripping onto hot iron, the sound of your labor being quietly undone. You wrap finished pieces in cloth, stack your tools on stone blocks, away from the splash zone. You do what you can, but the forge still leaks. When nobles complain about their damp boots, you want to laugh. You want to say, try working beside a fire, with steam in your lungs and your hammer slipping in your hands. But you don't. You nod, you fix their broken latch, and you go back to your forge. A place held together by rusted nails and stubbornness. A place where fire lives, even when the rain won't stop falling. You know your tools better than you know most people. You trust them more, too. They don't lie. They don't gossip. They don't forget what you've done. But even tools, like men, have limits. And when they fail, they don't do it quietly. It starts small. A chisel tip that dulls too soon. A punch that bends instead of striking true. A rasp that no longer bites the metal, but skates across it, toothless and tired. You feel it before you see it. A hitch in the motion, a stutter in the sound. Something isn't right, but there's no time to stop. No coin to spare for replacements, so you push them further. Then one day, snap, your hammer's shaft cracks down the middle mid-swing. The head flies forward and misses your apprentice by inches. He stares at it in shock. You don't even blink. You've seen worse. You pick up another hammer, older, heavier, and keep going. But it keeps happening. The tongs lose their grip and drop glowing iron onto your boot. You kick it away, yelling in pain. The boot is ruined, your foot blistered. Still, the job isn't done. A file shatters while you're working a delicate blade. The tip flies off and cuts your cheek. A thin line of blood trickles down, joining the sweat already falling from your brow. You wipe it away with a sleeve already soaked in soot. It's not just the tools that are wearing out, it's you. Your hands don't close as easily. Your arms tremble by evening. Your left knee grinds when you crouch. Even your eyes, once so quick to catch the color of heat, have started to blur. Not all the time, but often enough to worry you. And yet there are orders waiting. A new batch of hinges for the stables, a dozen nails for the miller, a plowshare that must be done before sunrise. You keep moving, keep striking. The rust wins, the village forgets. The village forgets, and the forge goes cold. Sometimes you talk to the tools, not out loud, not often, but in your head you whisper things. Hold together just a bit longer. I know you're tired. Me too. There's a comfort in that, knowing your tools are tired with you, that they, too, are fighting to stay useful. You patch what you can, bind handles in cloth, sharpen blades on worn stones, reinforce joints with scrap. You do your best, but you know the end is creeping closer. For the tools, for your body, for the fire that once felt endless. Still, you work, because a blacksmith doesn't stop when things break. He stops when he does, and you're not done yet. The forge breathes smoke, and so do you. It's not clean, airy smoke, not the kind that rises from campfires or candles. This smoke is thick, oily, alive. It coils around your throat like a sleeping snake. You've lived with it for so long, you've stopped noticing the burn. But sometimes, when the wind shifts or a new apprentice coughs for the 10th time, you're reminded, this is not how lungs are meant to live. The forge doesn't have a chimney, not a proper one. Just a hole in the ceiling that draws the worst of it out when the breeze cooperates. On still days, though, the smoke settles low. It clings to the beams. It pours down like fog. You've worked entire mornings with your eyes stinging and your nose running like you've caught some winter fever. You've long since stopped asking whether it's healthy. You already know the answer. Sometimes you wake up in the night coughing, deep, hollow, painful. It rattles your ribs and leaves you breathless. The taste of soot stays in your mouth long after the coughing stops. You sit up, rub your chest, and wait for your lungs to calm down. Then you lie back down and try to ignore the question that always comes next. How much longer can they take it? There's a pressure that never leaves. Not a sharp pain, not yet. Just a constant weight in the chest. A heaviness, as if your ribs have been packed with damp wool. You used to be able to run across the village if needed. Now, walking up the hill to the well makes you stop halfway, hands on knees, pretending to admire the view. Still, the fire must burn. You've learned to manage it. You keep a wet cloth nearby and tie it over your mouth on bad days. It doesn't help much, but it gives you the illusion of control. You've rearranged your forge to place the worst smoke corners farther from your tools. You added a second hole in the wall, not a window, just a broken board you never bothered to patch. But some part of you knows it's not enough. The damage is done slowly, quietly. The smoke doesn't kill all at once. It settles in a little deeper each day, until one morning you'll wake up and find the fire still burning, but nothing left in your chest to answer it. You've seen it before. Old blacksmiths with wheezing breath, too winded to lift a hammer. Some lived long enough to cough themselves into silence. Others simply dropped mid-swing, lungs too full of smoke to scream. But you're not there yet. You still breathe, still cough, still swing, because the forge needs lungs, and until yours give out completely, it will have them. There's no bell tower here, no town crier with a brass horn, no sundial set in the square to mark the passing hours. But still, the village keeps time, and oddly enough, it does so by you. The rhythm of your hammer is the rhythm of the town. At first light, when even the roosters are groggy, the first clang rings out. One long strike, to wake the forge. It echoes off the stone walls and wooden eaves. Birds scatter, dogs bark. Somewhere, a baker yawns and starts kneading dough. That sound, the hammer on iron, is how the town knows the day has begun. And throughout the morning, it continues. You hammer through breakfast, through chores, through gossip and market deals. The sounds change with the hour. A slow, deliberate pace when shaping something delicate. A fast, steady beat when flattening a blade. Villagers don't think about it consciously, but they feel it like a pulse beneath their errands. When the hammer stops, they notice. Around midday, there's a silence. It's short, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. Just long enough for you to drink something lukewarm or gnaw at a heel of bread while the metal cools. That silence unsettles people. Children pause their games. Merchants glance toward your shop. The absence of sound makes them feel as though something is wrong. Then the hammer starts again, and life resumes. You never meant to become the village's timekeeper. It just happened. Long enough at the forge, and people start measuring their days by your labor. You've heard them say it. We'll head out when the smith starts the afternoon work, or be back by the time the hammer goes quiet. You wonder if anyone realizes how odd that is. You aren't a noble. You don't issue commands. You don't carry a bell or a book or a badge of authority. And yet, they rely on you, not just for tools and repairs, but for structure. Without meaning to, you've become the metronome of their days. Even the priest has commented on it. Once, during a funeral, he said, "We are gathered in silence, save for the blacksmith's bell, as constant as the turning of seasons." You were halfway through reshaping a wagon pin. You didn't know they could hear it from the church. Sometimes, late at night, when the fire has died and your body aches too much to lie still, you wonder what would happen if you didn't start the day. If you let the village wake without the sound of your work, would they be late? Would the market feel off? Would they think something terrible had happened? Probably, because here, the forge is more than heat and metal. It's a heartbeat, and you, with all your scars and smoke-stained lungs, are its ticking clock. The festival banners go up days in advance. Strips of dyed linen strung between beams, bright as berries against the gray stone. The air smells different. Roasted meat, warm bread, apples stewed in honey. Children laugh louder. People dress in their second-best clothes. You see women wearing color, men with polished boots, and everyone walking like the weight of the year has momentarily lifted from their shoulders. But you don't stop working. No one tells you to, of course. They don't have to. They just assume you'll still be there, hammer in hand, apron stiff with soot, forge alive like always. After all, the festival doesn't mean things stop breaking. If anything, they break more. Someone snaps a buckle dancing. A cartwheel gives out on the road to town. A game of wrestling turns into a broken hinge on a merchant's chest. So they come to you. Not in shame, but not in celebration either. The blacksmith isn't part of the revelry. You're adjacent to it, like a millstone on the edge of a picnic. Useful, important, but separate. Your apprentice begs you to go. Just for an hour, he pleads. They're doing fire eating and music, and you shake your head. He doesn't ask again. But you see him watching the door, timing the hammer's rhythm, hoping for a lull. Later, when you're busy at the grindstone, he slips out without asking. You let him. He's young. He needs to taste joy before it hardens in his throat. You keep working. From your forge, you can hear the drums. The rhythmic beat cuts through the smoke. It syncs with the hammer at times, as if the village and your work are trying to dance together, poorly but earnestly. Voices rise in song. You catch a few lyrics, something about harvest, about saints, about long winters and short loves. You allow yourself a moment, just one. You step outside and lean against the doorway. The twilight has softened everything, even the rough corners of the village. Lights flicker in the distance. A girl twirls in a red skirt. A dog steals a pastry. Someone plays a lute badly, but with passion. And then, just as quickly, you go back in. The fire's waiting. Later that night, someone bangs on the door, a soldier with a bent blade. "There's a duel tomorrow," he says, half drunk and smelling of cider. "Can't fight with this." You nod, take the sword, get back to work, because you don't get days off. The forge doesn't believe in holy days or harvest dances. It only knows hot and cold, broken and fixed. And someone must stand in that space between. You're not angry. You don't feel left out. This is just how it is. The village can celebrate because you're still working. Sometimes your work follows a birth, a latch for a new cradle, tiny hinges for a toy chest carved by a proud father, even a small iron bell to hang from a doorway so the baby's cry won't go unheard. You like those jobs, quiet ones, quick ones. They remind you that life still happens, even in a village worn down by seasons and storms. But more often, your iron serves the other end of the journey. The undertaker visits with his usual hush. He never asks for much, a few nails, a couple of handles for the coffin, sometimes a decorative ring to hang a shroud. You don't ask who died. You can usually guess. News travels fast in a place this small. An old woman who hadn't opened her shutters in days. A child who coughed too long. A man who fell from a roof he should never have climbed. You craft those pieces with care, not because anyone will see them, but because they matter. The last thing a person touches, even if they're not the one holding it, iron for closure, iron for memory. Then come the other requests, the ones soaked in emotion. A grieving husband brings you his wife's brooch. "Can you turn this into something useful?" he asks, eyes red. You melt it down, reshape it into a belt buckle. It's not beautiful, but it holds his trousers, and something in his posture tells you that's enough. A boy brings you his father's broken knife. "Can you fix it?" he whispers. You don't. You make a new one, sharpened, balanced, lighter. You hand it over and say, "This is his now and yours." You never get used to it, but you learn to carry it. Iron holds memory. It holds weight. A sword that belonged to a hero, now passed down to a quiet son. A cooking pot reforged from a soldier's helmet. Horseshoes from a steed that outlived its night. These aren't just objects. They're stories, bent and hammered into new forms. One winter, the plague came close, too close. You forged so many coffin nails that your hands blistered through your gloves. The forge glowed day and night, not for farming tools, but for the dead. The priest said you were doing holy work. It didn't feel holy. It felt heavy. But still, you swung the hammer. There's a graveyard on the hill. From your forge, you can just see the edge of it through the smoke. On some mornings, when the fog is thin and the world is quiet, you look that way and wonder how much of your work rests there, buried in wood, earth, and silence. But then the door creaks open. A living man steps in, holding something broken. And just like that, you return to the living. Because even in grief, Someone needs the blacksmith. You've made a lot of blades in your life. Long, short, curved, straight, thick for butchers, thin for cooks, cruel for soldiers. Most go out the door as fast as they're finished. You don't remember them all, but there's one that stayed. It sits in the corner of your forge, just beside the hearth, wrapped in cloth, hidden in plain sight. You never talk about it, never show it to customers. You made it for yourself. Years ago, maybe decades, you're not even sure anymore, but it waits, and you know exactly where it is. You forged it after a bad winter, the kind where livestock froze upright and the ground didn't soften until spring. You were young then, still angry at the world. There'd been a fire in the village, a child lost, and even though it had nothing to do with you, the weight of it wouldn't leave. You hammered the blade over 3 nights, pouring every unspoken word into the steel. When it was finished, you wrapped it up and tucked it away. You've never drawn it, not because it's cursed or sacred, but because it represents something too dangerous to hold every day. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, you could stop the hammer, stop the fire, stop yourself. Everyone has a limit. You've seen it. The baker who lost her husband and stopped rising bread. The farmer who never returned to the fields after his son fell from the cart. The healer who packed up and left after losing 3 infants in 1 week. They all had something snap. You fear the day it happens to you. So the blade stays hidden, a reminder, a warning, a boundary. There are days when your hand drifts toward it without thinking. Days when the ache in your joints outshouts the voice in your head. Days when the work feels meaningless, like shaping iron for a world that only takes and never gives back. But then the bellows creak, the fire groans, a knock at the door, and you pull your hand away. You light the coals. You grab your tools. You go on. No one else knows the blade exists. Your apprentice once asked about the bundle in the corner, and you told him it was scrap. He nodded and never questioned it again. Someday, maybe, when you're gone, someone will unwrap it and wonder who it was meant for. Let them wonder. For now, it remains untouched. Because, as long as it stays wrapped, so do you, still working, still standing, still forging for a world that may never say thank you, but still needs you anyway. The blade is not for them. It's for the moment you hope never comes. Winter changes everything. The forge, once a sanctuary of unbearable heat, becomes the only place in the village where you can feel your fingers. You stand closer to the fire now, not just to work, but to survive. The stone walls leak cold, like a cracked jug leaks water. Frost grows inside the windows. Ice clings to your tools if left unattended. And the anvil, the faithful, unblinking anvil, turns colder than a grave. You rise before dawn, breath fogging in the air before you've even lit the coals. The flint bites harder in winter. Your hands move slower. You fumble with the tinder, curse the damp kindling, and pray the first flicker catches. When it does, you hunch over it like a starving man over a crust of bread. Coal burns differently now. It eats faster, demands more. You go through twice the fuel and make half the profit. Customers don't think about it. They want warm hinges, fire pokers, repaired sled runners. They ask for iron and pay in root vegetables or promises. You accept because you have no choice. Your boots are wet more often than dry. Snow melts at the threshold of the forge, then freezes again by night. You've slipped more times than you care to admit. Once, your apprentice found you sitting in the slush, not moving, just staring. You told him your leg had cramped. You lied. You'd simply needed a minute to remember why you still do this. The cold gets into your bones in ways the fire can't undo. Your knuckles swell until they no longer bend properly. You wrap your hands in cloth, then leather, then cloth again. Still, the pain seeps through. You hammer slower now, because the joints don't forgive as easily. The metal doesn't care. There are fewer visitors to the forge in winter. Most stay indoors unless something breaks. The silence between orders stretches longer. The coins are fewer. The food thinner. You ration what little fat you have and patch your clothes with old apron scraps. The dog you sometimes feed comes less often, too. Even he knows better than to linger in the cold. But the fire is faithful. It waits each morning, patient, hungry. It doesn't complain when you're late. It doesn't mock your limping. It roars back to life if you coax it just right. And in that moment, that one moment of light against the frozen dark, you feel like something ancient and alive. You work less for others in the winter and more for survival. Hooks to dry clothes, brackets to keep shutters sealed. A little stoveplate for the widow down the road. She can't pay, but she still brings soup. You eat it slowly, letting the warmth last. In winter, everything feels harder, but the forge still burns. And so do you. Not every blacksmith makes swords. In fact, most don't. War is seasonal. Farming is constant. And the thing no one talks about, the thing that holds villages together, that keeps roofs from flying off and carts from collapsing, is nails. Plain, ugly, essential. You've made thousands of them, probably more. You lost count years ago. They don't take long, not compared to a horseshoe or hinge. Heat a rod, cut a piece, hammer the tip square, shape the head, cool it, do it again, do it again, do it again. You've made nails in silence, in storms, in the dark, even once while ill with a fever so bad you couldn't remember your own name, but you still remembered the motion. Your body knows it better than your mind does. People don't thank you for nails. They thank the carpenter when the chair holds. They thank the roofer when the wind doesn't blow the shingles away. But it's your nails holding those planks together, your iron inside their walls, beneath their feet. A nail is a promise, a quiet one. It says, "This will stay where you put it." And you've kept that promise more times than you can remember. There was a time, during a stormy spring, when the church steeple nearly collapsed. Lightning had split part of the frame. The villagers gathered, shouting over the wind, and someone said, "Get the blacksmith, not the priest, not the builder. You brought nails, hundreds of them, still hot in a cloth bundle. You climbed that ladder, hands shaking, wind roaring, and passed nails to the men above. You weren't the one hammering them in, but it was your work that made the repairs hold. No one celebrated you, but the church still stands. You've seen people argue over swords, seen them boast about who has the finest knife, the sharpest edge, but no one brags about nails. They just expect them to be there doing their job quietly in the dark. That's fine. You don't need to be remembered for grand things. You'll settle for strength that endures unseen. You'll settle for being the reason someone's roof doesn't collapse while they sleep. Sometimes you wonder how much of the town is made from your iron. Not just nails, but bolts, rods, hooks, locks, tiny things holding together lives that rarely notice. You walk through the market and look around, not at the stalls, but at what holds them up, not at the doors, but the hinges. Not at the wheels, but the pins. Your work is everywhere. Just quiet, just hidden, just essential. Not glorious, but permanent. You carry the forge with you, even when you're nowhere near it. It clings to you, in your hair, in your skin, beneath your nails. A mix of soot, sweat, burnt wool, and iron dust. People wrinkle their noses when you walk by. Some step back. Others just wave their hand and say, "That's the smell of a working man." They mean well, but you know what they mean. It's in your clothes. No matter how often you rinse them, they come out stiff, stained with smoke, edges singed. Your apron smells of tallow and singed leather. The straps never fully dry in winter. When the wind kicks up, your forge's scent follows you like a second shadow. You've tried scrubbing once. Years ago, you even soaked your hands in vinegar and lemon. Didn't help. The smell isn't just on you, it's in you, in the folds of your palms, in the pores of your arms, in the breath that escapes your lungs before you even speak. Children sometimes laugh when you pass. The fireman, they call you. They say you smell like burnt bread and dirt. They're not wrong. You've heard worse. One merchant once asked you to stay outside his shop, said you might ruin the linens. Another sniffed and muttered, "Smells like death warmed over." You didn't reply. You just handed him the nails he asked for and left without a word. Your apprentice still thinks he can escape it. He washes obsessively, keeps a sprig of lavender in his shirt. You say nothing. Let him try. He'll learn. Everyone learns. The forge doesn't leave room for vanity. The worst part isn't how people react. It's how used to it you've become. You don't smell it anymore. Not really. You'll catch a trace when you change clothes, or pass a reflective window and see the soot on your cheek. But mostly, it's like background noise, always there, unacknowledged. You used to fear it would make people turn away, that no one would want to sit beside you at the tavern. And you were right, most don't. They find other tables, farther from the wall. You've learned to sit with your back to the hearth. That way, at least, the fire gives them an excuse. But some people don't mind. A few understand. The farmer smells of soil and pigs. The tanner smells worse. The chimney sweep smells like a collapsed house. You all carry the tools of your trade, not just in your hands, but on your skin. And maybe that's the real badge of the blacksmith. Not the hammer, not the burns, but the scent, heavy, honest, unshakable, that says, "I was near the fire, and I stayed." The man who came to your forge wasn't from the village. You could tell by the boots, fine leather, stitched with care, and by the way he looked at your tools like he was deciding what each was for, not curious, calculating. He didn't give a name, just set a bundle on the bench and said, "Can you fix this?" You unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a blade, curved slightly, chipped near the edge, stained with something dark that wasn't rust, foreign steel. You could feel it before you even touched it. The weight was different. The balance was off from anything local. A war blade used. You nodded. "It'll take a few days." He said nothing, just looked at you like he was measuring something deeper than your words. "Don't change the shape," he said, finally. "Just make it strong again." You worked on it late, after the village had gone quiet. Something about it made you cautious, not afraid, not exactly, just aware. You kept the windows closed and the fire low. You sharpened it in silence, every scrape of the file sounding louder than it should. The edge was dull, but not from neglect. It had bitten into something hard. Bone, maybe. You didn't ask. When it was done, you wrapped it again, carefully, respectfully. He returned without knocking, took the blade, paid in silver, more than it was worth. He didn't thank you, didn't explain, just nodded once, the kind of nod that carried weight, and left. You watched him walk away, the blade hidden beneath his cloak, and something in your chest tightened, because sometimes your work doesn't stay in the village. Sometimes it leaves, carried by strangers with no names, going toward things you'll never see. Sometimes it goes to protect, sometimes to destroy, and you never know which. You've learned not to ask. But you do wonder, where are your blades now? Are they in battlefields, buried in soil, soaked through with history? Are they on distant roads, worn at the hip of travelers who speak languages you'll never hear? Are they sitting quietly in homes, resting by the hearth like old, retired soldiers? Or are they still cutting, still drawing blood, still breaking shields and splitting skulls? The truth is, once iron leaves your hands, it stops being yours. That's part of the craft. You shape it, you birth it, but you don't get to raise it. Still, every time you finish a blade like that, stranger's blade, soldier's blade, you feel it stay behind, not the steel, but the weight, the memory, the question. And when you next pick up the hammer, it feels a little heavier, because you're not just forging metal, you're forging consequences. There's a strange kind of silence that falls over the forge when no one comes. It doesn't happen often, maybe once a season. A day when no carts break, no hinges loosen, no blades dull. You wake early, as always, stoke the coals, and wait. But no knock, no shout from the doorway. Just the hiss of damp logs and the distant chatter of a village that, for once, seems fine without you. At first, it's unsettling. You pace, fiddle with tools that don't need attention, sharpen a chisel that's already sharp, check the bellows for leaks you know aren't there. You keep glancing at the doorway, expecting a shadow, a silhouette, anyone. No one comes. By midday, you begin to wonder, what if this is it? What if they've learned to manage without you? What if the younger smith in the next town has stolen your work? What if the fire you've tended your whole life has outlived its use? The forge feels colder then, even with the fire going. The heat doesn't reach your bones the same way. Your hammer swings feel heavier, not from weight, but from doubt. You think back to your first days, when you were the one knocking on doors, offering to fix broken pots just for practice. When every job felt like a test, and every satisfied customer meant another night of food. You worked hard to become needed. Now, you wonder what happens when that need fades. You sit down on the old stool near the wall. It creaks beneath you, familiar and tired. You stare at the glowing coals, watching them shift, collapse inward, and breathe out smoke like some dying beast. There's a kind of peace in it, too. A strange, unexpected quiet that doesn't demand anything. No orders to fill, no expectations. Just the sound of your breath and the low hum of the forge, like a heartbeat that refuses to stop, even when the world around it pauses. Eventually, you stand again, out of habit more than purpose. You find a scrap of iron, something broken, not important, and you begin to shape it, slowly, carefully, just for yourself. No commission, no deadline, just iron and flame, and you. The clang of the hammer echoes differently when it's not for someone else. It sounds more honest, like a song sung for no audience. And in that moment, you realize something. You didn't become a blacksmith because people needed you. You became a blacksmith because you needed the fire. Because in the rhythm of the hammer, in the hiss of quenching steel, in the stubborn heat of the forge. You found something that asked nothing of you, yet gave everything back. So even when no one comes, you still work. You've had your share of injuries, a smashed thumb, a broken toe from a falling horseshoe, countless cuts and splinters that never left a scar. But the burn stayed. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't even dramatic. You'd been working late, too late. The forge was quiet. Your apprentice had gone home hours earlier. You were reshaping a blade that didn't want to bend. The metal was stubborn, and so were you. You reached too soon. The bar looked cool, dark, almost black. You touched it with bare fingers, just for a moment. But a moment is all it takes. The pain was instant, white-hot, blinding. You didn't scream. You just froze, then pulled back and stared at your own hand, not quite believing what you saw. Skin blistered before your eyes, the smell of cooked flesh mixed with coal smoke. You dunked it in the barrel. The water hissed louder than any sword. Then you sat down, cradling your hand like something separate from yourself, something broken you didn't know how to fix. 4 days after, you couldn't work, not properly. You tried to hide it, wrapped the hand in linen, kept the bandages under gloves, but the village noticed. They always do. Some offered sympathy, others just asked, "When will my nails be ready?" The wound healed, mostly, but the scar stayed, ugly and pink, stretched across your palm like a map of pain you can't forget. It tightens in the cold, stings in the rain, burns when you grip the hammer too long. A reminder, etched into flesh, of the price of distraction. You learned from it. You learned that fire is never truly your friend, only your tool. You learned to respect even the quietest coal, the dimmest ember. You learned that the forge will take from you, bit by bit, if you ever stop paying attention. But strangely, you don't hate the scar. It's part of you now, like the calluses on your fingers, like the notch in your shoulder from years of swinging, like the way your back hunches just a little more each winter. The burn is your history, your warning, your proof. Others see it and flinch. You see it and nod. You've since taught your apprentice how to tell when iron is truly cool, not by sight, not even by steam, but by sound, by feel, by the way the metal breathes. Because if you don't listen, it punishes you. Every blacksmith has at least one scar like this. Some have many. They don't talk about them often, but you can see it in how they move, the careful grip, the quiet respect, the understanding that this work, however noble, demands pain. And the fire never apologizes. It just keeps burning. They all leave eventually. You've trained a few over the years, wide-eyed boys, sometimes girls, sent by their parents or wandering in on their own, drawn to the fire like moths. They come with soft hands and questions. They leave with burns and answers. Some stay longer than others, a season, a year. One stayed 3, almost 4. That one hurt. You don't treat them like sons. That would be cruel. You treat them like firewood, feed them into the craft. Let them burn long enough to take the shape of the trade, then pull them out before they're lost. You teach them to grip, to swing, to file. You show them how to listen, not just to you, but to the iron. Most never say goodbye properly. They just drift. One morning, they don't show up, or they leave a note scrawled in charcoal. Or they pack in the night and you find their cot empty, blanket folded with a kind of quiet guilt. You don't blame them. It's not an easy life. It doesn't get better. You get stronger, sure, until you don't. And even when you do everything right, The work takes things from you: sight, skin, breath, time. One left to join a traveling merchant, thinking he could make better coin selling iron than shaping it. Another went off to fight in a noble's war, craving glory. You never heard from him again. The last one, the one who stayed longest, said he wanted to build his own forge. You gave him your second set of tongs, told him not to cheapen his coal. He cried a little. You didn't. The forge doesn't mourn, but sometimes you do. Quietly, when the fire is low and the hammer's resting, you miss the chatter, the questions, the way they'd run to fetch water or stoke the coals without needing to be told. You missed the sense that someone would still be here when you weren't, because that's the part no one tells you. The work goes on, but eventually you don't. You look at the anvil, at the scuffed floor where boots once stood. You touch the hooks where tools used to hang in twos, and you wonder, when you're gone, will someone swing the hammer? Will they keep the fire going? Or will it all grow cold? Apprentices leave. That's their nature. But the forge remembers every blister, every lesson, every blow passed from one hand to the next. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will remember you, not just as a blacksmith, but as the reason they still work. Until then, you keep the tools in order. You sweep the floor, you light the coals, and wait for the next one. It isn't the biggest hammer, or the newest, or the one with the fancy brass collar gifted by that merchant years ago. It's the plain one, the first one that felt like it belonged in your hand. Heavy enough to drive iron, light enough to lift on a bad day. You've used others, sure, worn through them like boots, but this one, this hammer, it stayed. The handle is darker now than it used to be, polished by sweat, soot, and memory. There's a slight curve in it, from years of favoring one side. You never sanded it straight. It fits your grip better this way. It knows your rhythm. When you die, and you will, because even blacksmiths break, eventually, this hammer will still be here. Someone will find it. Maybe the next apprentice, maybe a stranger, maybe no one at all for a long time. You think about that more than you admit. What will they see? Will they notice the way the head is worn down on one side, the mark of 1,000 angled strikes? Will they feel the smoothness in the grip where your calloused fingers rested, day after day, year after year? Will they wonder who held it, what was built, what was broken? Or will they toss it aside, thinking it's just a tool? You've never carved your name into it, never needed to. Your mark is in the metal it's shaped, in the gates that swing straight, the nails that hold roofs steady, the blades that found their way into hands that may never know yours. And still, there's something about the hammer itself, something personal, private. You've spoken to it, though you wouldn't admit that aloud. In quiet moments, after long days, you've said things like one more, or that was a good hit, or just sat with it, resting on your knee, while the forge faded into red coals. It's strange, all you've built, all the noise you've made, and yet it's the quiet memory of the hammer you think will outlast you. Not your voice, not your name, just the rhythm you left behind. Some might say that's a small legacy, but you know better, because this hammer, worn, weighted, warm from your hand, has shaped a life yours, and in doing so, it shaped others, too. It fed families, held bridges, bent the world into usefulness. You may not get a monument, no statue, no plaque in the square, but this hammer, it's enough. You rest it beside the anvil one last time, not because you're finished, but because for tonight, just tonight, You want to remember what it feels like to pause, to look at the thing that helped build your life, and know it was never just a tool. It doesn't go out with a roar, not with a spark shower or the cracking collapse of coals. The fire dies slowly, the way the sun slips behind the hills, or an old man lays down after a long day, knowing there's nothing left to fix. You don't stop working all at once. It begins with one missed morning, a late rise, joints too stiff to lift the bellows. Then another day where you sit by the forge but don't light it. The hammer rests in your lap, not out of defeat, but out of recognition. You've given it everything. One day, someone else brings the firewood. Another trims the coals. Your apprentice, grown now, takes up the tongs with confidence. You watch, quiet. Your presence isn't required anymore, but he still glances your way, like a child checking his father's nod. You give it. That's enough. The village still buzzes. Carts break, gates rust, hinges snap. But you're not the one they call first. The world goes on. That's the point. That's the hope. And so, the fire dies. Not today, not all at once, but soon. You walk through the shop in the evening. Everything looks the same, but feels different. The anvil still holds its silent strength. The tools rest in familiar places. Even the smell lingers, smoke and sweat and steel. But the urgency is gone. The forge no longer demands. It waits. You touch the hammer one last time, the old one, the one that fits like a memory. You don't lift it, just feel its weight. Then you leave it there. There's peace in the letting go. Outside, the stars are rising, crisp, clear, cold. You breathe deeply, and for once, it doesn't burn. Your lungs ache, but not from smoke, from stillness. You lean on the doorframe, listen to the wind, and let the quiet settle in. In the morning, someone will relight the coals. It won't be you, but that's all right. You were never the fire. You were the one who kept it alive long enough to pass it on, and that is enough.